Anyway, but as always, this is one of the most anticipated tours of the Preservation Month, and I'm pleased that you all turned out. And we're going to have two sections of tours. Jane Davies, raise your hand there. She's going to be taking the 19th century portion of the cemetery. That portion has many of the early pioneers of Evansville and Vanderburgh County. And in fact, she's going to have a few special words about some people who were important in the founding of Vanderburgh County 200 years ago. So it's a bicentennial tour. And I'm going to be over there in the lawn section. For those who don't want the slightly hillier section, follow me. We'll be there. It's flatter. And the other feature of the tour this year is the Arboretum. Since the last tour, Oakhill Cemetery, as well as Locust Hill, has officially been designated as an arboretum. In other words, a collection of trees. And as you go around, we'll point out some of the markers. You can actually take your phone, and if you have the right app on it, and if you are adept with your phone, unlike me, who is not, you can actually upload information onto your phone and read about the tree. So anyway, here's Chris Cook, the superintendent of the cemetery. How many people do you have under you?
Over 70,000.
He has more staff than anybody else in the city of Evansville.
All but about 6 are quiet. But welcome to Oakhill Cemetery and Arboretum. My name is Chris Cook. This is my 10th year as superintendent. I'd like to point out City Arborist Sean Dickerson back there in the back. He'll also be on the tour to help provide some information about the trees. But it's a wonderful facility that dates back to 1853. You're going to learn a lot about the history today. You got me thrown off my game a little bit. Some of the things you'll notice going on, we're doing an ADA compliancy project with the maintenance or the office building that dates back to 1899. So you will see some construction with the ADA compliancy with a bathroom and a ramp, and you're going to see a parking area go in soon behind the building towards the lake. One thing about the app on the trees, we had a photo walk last weekend, and the purpose of the photo walk was a lot of the tree pictures were taken at that walk. You're going to start seeing more of that stuff populate. If you scan a tree QR code right now, you're not going to have very much information, but we're in the process of working with volunteers to get that populated, and the goal is to have a picture of the tree all 4 seasons, and it's 100% volunteers kind of helping that out. A little bit of a public service announcement: we are still a working cemetery. Graves are $9.95. We put $100 down. You can make monthly payments without interest. That's the PSA. If you want to talk about that, you can come and see me anytime. But there's over 70,000 interments here. One other big project that we're proud of is we partner with Vectron on a solar farm. There's a $5.5 million solar farm that's going to be installed in the next couple months along Morgan Avenue. They've leased that property of 16 acres. There's still 35 acres to go. Plenty of room for future cemetery growth. But there's going to be a lot of work back there, and you're going to see that area get cleaned up immensely. The entire fence is going to be replaced. You should see that start to happen around Memorial Day. From about the end of Willow, where the brick wall ends, all the way around Morgan, it's going to really clean up that issue for us. So it's going to be, the back door is going to be as good as the front door here. We do have events throughout the year. Next Saturday night right here, we're partnering with Chemo Buddies and Osborne Funeral Home for a lantern release where you can memorialize your loved one that died of cancer. And we're going to do a release on the lake with the little floaty lanterns. It's a first of its kind event. It'll be next Saturday night right here at 6 o'clock. Memorial Day service will be at 11 o'clock on Memorial Day right here. I believe Mr. Browning passed some information around. That's a listing of all the Memorial Day services for the cemeteries, but ours here at Oakhill is at 11, Locust Hill is at 10 o'clock. And then we have a butterfly release with a Zara Care Hospice we partnered with. That'll be the first Thursday in June. I believe it's June 7th. Again, at 6 o'clock right here, where it's 100% free. You can memorialize your loved one and release a butterfly. It's one of the better events that I've really enjoyed throughout the year. to have the butterflies go out. But if you have a question, don't hesitate to call or email us. Welcome to Oakhill Cemetery. Sean, did you have anything to say about the trees?
Just enjoy looking at them. They're beautiful.
One final thought. A new event that'll be in its third year in the fall on October 20th, we will have our Twilight Tour. And that is at 5:30. It's a $15 donation. There'll be reenactors, and every dollar raised from that goes to help protect the ash trees. There's roughly 23, 24 ash trees at Oakhill Cemetery. So if you want a tour like this with a little bit more depth and some reenactors, October 20th, it's a Saturday night, and we're going to be focused more around the lake this year, so kind of mark your calendar. Throughout the year, always check our website. We're on the city website, evansville.in.gov. Under cemeteries, we're on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. If you have a question, don't hesitate to call, and welcome to Oakhill Cemetery and Arboretum. So we're going to divide up.
We're going to divide up.
See, Jane's going to go up the hill. If you have a problem with hills, there will be some death. Dennis is going to go this way. So,
but some buildings, the administration building from 1899, built of Indiana limestone. The architect was the Shopville firm, and it's just gorgeous. If you ever get a chance, go in there. The Edward Jane also was designed by him, and it has a kind of a Chinese theme to it. In 1903, the original part over there was platted in the early 1850s. Most of this was the lawn burial section. Things are flatter, closer to the ground, with the exception of like the Mausoleum City that's right around. I'm from Michigan, that's a pond. It's not a lake. But one of the earlier mausoleums is right here. And it was a community mausoleum, one of the first to go up. And it went up in 1931. It was financed by a group of Evansville businessmen. And it's a work of art. It cost $28,000 when it went up. And there are a few prominent people in there. Gilmore Haney, who was one of the developers of the Evansville Zoo. Thomas Morton, who was the person who organized the Lamasco Bank. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Lamasco Bank. That was absorbed by National City Bank, and then the name is all but gone, has been gone for a while. But if you come closer, it has wonderful bronze doors. As you go by, take a look at the detailing in the doors. But the part of this that I just love is the stained glass window in the back. It's one of the most gorgeous pieces of art in Oakhill Cemetery. And you're welcome to go in. Biber Engine Company from St. Louis is buried there along with his wife. But you can see some much newer interments. There's Savage from 2007. There are a few miscellaneous places for internments right around the pond here. Well, a lake you can't see across.
No, a pond.
Oh, a pond is a small puddle of water like that.
Okay, and a lake is much larger.
Yes. Okay. And it's not man-made. The Erskine Mausoleum, it has a very much of an ancient Greek feel to it. And that's intentional because I think we visualize these Greek temples and the Greek architecture. We visualize and attach that with the concept of permanence. And this one right here was built for the family of Wilbur Erskine. And He, with Mr. McCutcheon, had a grain mill in Evansville, and he had an uncle, Tracy Haller Shute, who was son of the first teacher in Evansville and didn't have any place for internment, so he was included here. It's kind of interesting how families sometimes included others in their family plots or mausoleums. WE on the doors, Wilbur Erskine. You can see it suffered. Look at the stained glass in the rear of that. Suffered from vandalism. That beer built. Charles Hartmetz, his father had a brewery in Babytown. You know where how many people know where Babytown is? It's the up the New Harmony Road. That would be northwest of Upper Mount Vernon Road. And there was in fact, there's a tavern there, the Hilltop Tavern. That's Babytown. Anyway, he had that. And very early in the 20th century, 3 major breweries in town formed the Evansville Brewery Association. And they're the ones who had the brewery at the corner of Fulton and the Lloyd Expressway. And of course, that went into various iterations. Finally, it was Sterling, and then it went out of business. But early on, the Hartmetz Brewery was a part of that, and it's an impressive monument. Look at what do you see in the doors right there? Upside down torches. Did they get those on up by accident upside down? No. That's the Roman symbol of death. A torch that's upside down. The world's turned upside down. Someone has died. You see a lot of symbolism here in the cemetery.
Is Hartmetz a bakery too, or something close to it? Now, North or Main Street, about by the Lloyd.
Yes.
Is that Hartmetz? Is that the name of it?
I think so, yes. If you collect things Evansville, his name should be very memorable to you. Old Pottery. They started in Evansville in 1848 or 49, but in 1908 they moved to Huntingburg, although they kept their offices here until they went out of business in 1944. The family is buried here. This shape of stone is called a mastaba, which is Arabic for bench. And you see this form. It's basically a rectangular block in many places here in the cemetery.
The Homestead House was just torn down. It's on about a block west of Columbia, a block west of First Avenue on Columbia, and they just tore it down about a month ago.
It was one of the nicest houses on Columbia. Do you know where the Columbia Antique Mall used to be? Mm-hmm. It's not far from there.
I saw it, been by there. It was bad, didn't it?
Yep.
They're actually really
It's
great
a holly tree.
honeysuckle. So if you come out here in about a week, or maybe a week and a half, these will be in full bloom. And wherever there's a holly tree, it really smells awesome. It's just an outstandingly wonderful smell.
Is that normal for them to have some yellow leaves this time of year?
Yeah, you'll have a few here and there, especially the American holly is just more prone to stress, some diseases or shedding.
Shedding, I thought it was like natural shedding.
Yeah, actually all evergreen trees actually shed.
It was across the street from Woolworths, not far from Penny's.
Harding and Miller.
Harding and Miller, this is Mr. Miller. Again, this is a theme you'll see. I think we all remember the eternal flame at President Kennedy's grave. Well, that wasn't a new idea at all. It's just a common way to memorialize people, and the idea of the eternal flame shows up again and again right here. Hillary Bacon. Is that name familiar, Hillary Bacon? Well, Mr. Bacon and Mr. Lahr had a large department store in Evansville on the corner of Southeast 4th and Locust. But actually he is known more as the husband of his wife, who was Albion Fellows Bacon. Known for her book, Ashes. Let's see, the words Ashes is,
Angela's Ashes?
no, not Angela's Ashes. Well, it was about tenement reform. She was very much of a national leader in making sure that rental property is of the proper standards for inhabitation. But Albion Fellows Bacon is right here. She died in 1933.
The most prominent person in Indiana, probably of the 18th and 19th, woman in the 18th, 19th century.
I think she is one of the most prominent women in all of Evansville's history, actually. Her sister wrote the Little Colonel books. Do you remember the Little Colonel movie with Shirley Temple? Yeah. Well, that's her story, her sister's story. Okay, back here, there's another mastaba. Of course, the Bacon is the mastaba Van Orman. The Van Orman family owned a series of hotels. And the last hotel that they built in Evansville was in McCurdy. They were prominent people, and the son, F. Harold Van Orman, was a prominent politician. He became the lieutenant governor of the state of Indiana. And when he died, I looked up his obituary in both the Democratic and Republican newspapers. He was a Republican, and when I looked it up in the Republican newspaper, it was kind of just a ho-hum listing of, yes, Lieutenant Governor had been involved with the city here, that there. I thought, boy, not much. But then when I read the obituary in the Democratic newspaper, oh my gosh. The writer talked about his colorful language and the fact that 3 of his wives had been circus performers. We had human beings as politicians, then as now. Obelisk is a form that comes from ancient Egypt. It says Goodlay on it. Mr. Goodlay was a retailer in downtown Evansville. He was a local politician, Vanderbilt County Treasurer in 1884, and he's elected mayor in 1889. Over there, it's slightly brown in color. He owned a dry goods store and on the west side, and if you look on West Franklin Street, there's a whole row of nice looking historic buildings across Franklin Street from the library. He's responsible for them. Granite, and of course granite is very durable, very, very, very durable. Over here, the Keck Monument, another fine piece of sculpture. Of course, this is an angel. the world did we get this concept of an angel with bird wings? Anybody have an idea what culture that came from?
Greek.
From the ancient Romans. You're not far off. That's actually a Roman icon for a heavenly creature. It's not even Hebrew, but we've adopted it. You might say, oh my goodness, look what vandalism has done. Well, it was the vandalism from the Lord on June the 8th, 1982. Do you remember that one? The bad storm.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord's more powerful than anything that that man can put together. This gentleman's house, the house of Asro Dyer. He built the house where I live in 1873, and he and his wife, Prudy, lived there from 1873 until the early 1930s. They had 3 children, but unfortunately only one lived to adulthood, and that was rather common. The one who lived to adulthood married, the one who lived to adulthood was Willie Dyer Butterfield. She married Algernon Sidney Butterfield, and they're the people from Smith and Butterfield. So that's why you see Dyer Butterfield right here.
40?
30.
30, 80. I started work here in 2001, and this is kind of, I think that's the same year.
Wow.
So this is a red oak.
17
And
years.
the oaks in the red oak group grow a little bit faster than the white oaks. But they sometimes they get the stem galls though, so you have to watch that. But they actually grow faster than you think.
Yep, you've got it, Hilton Vilker, the hardware store where the Gerst house is now. He was one of the partners in that business. I always used to tell my wife that if I couldn't find it in Hilton Vilker, it wasn't worth going out to get, because Hilton Vilker had everything. A good old-fashioned hardware store. They opened that up in 1905. He was also instrumental in establishing the Old National Bank. Very pleasantly situated here. George Eggers was born in Holland. He came into town as a bookkeeper for the Indiana Title Company. He eventually became John Fendrick's personal secretary. You know John Hendrick, the cigar fellow? And he did quite well for himself. Behind you, a very, very attractive monument to William Carson. He was an industrialist and refrigerator pioneer. I think most of you know that Evansville at one time was the refrigeration capital of the world. And he obtained the contract to make the Sears and Roebuck Cold Spot refrigerators. Remember Cold Spot? Some of us do.
Sunbeam Plastics also, I believe he helped start that as well.
Yes. Again, the eternal flame is there right again. This right here is who were part of the Cook Brewery. How many of you have ever had a little taste, at least, of Cook's Gold Bloom beer? One person. Well, they started brewing that again about 10 years ago, and I had a little taste of it. I couldn't avoid it. Had to try it. It was not bad, but it wasn't Heineken, that's for sure. Dr. William Laval, the large cross over there. He was a physician. He was trained at the Evansville Medical College. So having a medical college in Evansville isn't new, but in the 19th century we had one. And he was the last surviving doctor who had been trained there. And if you take a look at the cross, come up a little closer and see how exquisite the floral carvings are here.
Did he also have a pharmacy on Franklin Street?
Yes, he did. He started out as a pharmacist and then finished his medical studies.
One of the buildings says Laval up on the top of it still, I believe, across from the library.
Right. That is true. The mausoleum right here is the Eichelhart Mausoleum. Take a look. Here's one of the Arboretum's tags. You can see right here the QR code on it. You can upload in your phone. It has the scientific name of the tree plus the common name, the green hawthorn. And then it tells where it comes. It's generally found southeastern United States. But right here is the Eichelhart Mausoleum. This is for Addison Eichelhart. I think many of you remember the Eichelhart Mill in town. And the stained glass window in the rear still has the eye on it. And thank goodness vandals haven't broken that window. And take a look at the motifs up there. It's Egyptian. And Egyptian motifs are very common in cemeteries.
That family, they are really the father of the mills here in town, and Phyllis is the daughter of Addison, and she died in 2016. There's still one child left. If you go across from Harrison High School, there's 24 acres, and they're going to make that estate a park and a museum for the whole city. And that's been under process for the last year, will be under for another year. But this is the Eichelharts that have remodeled the park across from Harrison High School. And it's because Phyllis gave the whole estate to that park. It's Phyllis Eichelhart Kardashian, and she just died. She has a brother still living in Michigan.
You mentioned that the property is becoming an arboretum.
It's going to be called, it's called the Eichelhart Arboretum Aviary is what they're calling it. And they've identified most trees, like our arborist has said here, they've identified most trees there already with little labels like that. And they have tons of good, really museum pieces. They used to have a horse farm there and a cow farm on that 24 acres next to Harrison. Beautiful trees there, though, and lots of mature trees.
At Fielding and Lincoln.
It's a great piece of real estate. It'll be a wonderful addition to the city of Evansville. Okay, we're going to go back.
Yeah, Phyllis just died.
That's Phyllis right here. Right there, right there.
Hi, Phyllis.
Edgar Addison Eichelhart, 23 to 2009. Marie Elizabeth Benhoist Eichelhart, January 30, 24.
All I could find out, as I said, they had no children. They loved horses and dogs and owned and sold fine race horses. Mr. McCurdy, Colonel McCurdy, put Evansville on the corporate map of America when he brought his Brighton Buggy Works to Evansville in 1902. The first buggy rolled out of the production line in January of 1903 for Sears and Roebuck. And eventually his company started producing general utility gas engines and bodies for the Sears and Chevrolet and Durant and Studebaker company. uncle by the name of Moritz Schalowski in producing tables here in Evansville. And right over here you can see the Eagles monuments. In several places in the cemetery, lodges and organizations bought sections of the cemetery for their members to be buried. And if you take a look, I think the eagle has supposedly a wingspan of 6 feet. At least that's what my predecessor came to Evansville in the mid-1800s, and his physician, in the 1880s, 1870s, and 80s, said that he needed to find some kind of activity to keep him going. You know, the sedentary life of being a jeweler was causing deterioration, physical deterioration. So he took up archaeology, and which just meant he grabbed a shovel and went to places like Angel Mounds and started digging. With other is now at the Smithsonian. It's one of the best collections of Indian ceramics from the Midwest anywhere. Unfortunately, he didn't keep good records when he collected it. But almost no one kept good records at that time, so it's...
Was Artiste Pool named after him?
Pardon?
There was a swimming pool called Artiste
I
Swimming
think
Pool?
so. It was named after the family.
Yeah.
I thought I remembered Artiste, but that, where was it? Where was Artiste?
Beautiful roses on the front of it.
Dennis, tombstones are usually at the feet of people's graves or at the heads.
It's kind of looking like it's mixed.
Usually.
It's mixed. It's
Mixed.
mixed. Like here, this is at the head of the plot, and you'll see the family right here. You know, it depends on the geography of each individual plot. I think they try to do it this way, so you can see in the back prominently the name of the family, and then folks are in front of it, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. Or there are other reasons things may be switched around. Like with my parents' grave plot, my mother wanted to be head to foot with her mother, so they usually have the husband on one side, either left or right, and the wife on the other side. With my parents, they're flipped around because my mother wanted to be next to her mother. Okay, there's no law. You can do it as you wish. The Morgan family, John and Margaret, and they had a large house on Southeast 2nd, just past Mulberry. And there are several benches like this that serve as tombstones here in the cemetery. And young couples occasionally find these at ours. But it's a nice way to memorialize someone. He was the third superintendent of Oakhill Cemetery. He held that position from 1898 to 1932. He was a florist and a landscaper, and he's the one who's responsible for planting many of the trees here. In fact, he used to take school groups through the cemetery on tree tours. And the Arboretum here is named in memory of him, but that's where he's buried. There are lots and lots of stories of people in the cemetery. Here's another human story here in the cemetery. I wondered, such a beautiful piece of sculpture up there, reaching heavenward, looking heavenward, and I thought, well, there's only one stone down here for Lillian Merritt Gilbert. So I thought, what is this about? So I looked it up. As I said, she died when she was 18 years old, and her husband was Dr. William Gilbert, and he had founded the Gilbert Sanitarium. You know where the Hadi Shrine building is on Southeast Riverside Drive? Well, that was his sanitarium. In other words, at that time it was a hospital. In fact, my wife's grandmother died there because when it was a hospital. And eventually the Hadi Shrine got a hold of it. That was Gilbert's hospital. When his wife, Lillian, died, he was very much bereft. Very young, very beautiful bride. And to memorialize her, put up this gorgeous piece of sculpture. Well, a few years later, Dr. Gilbert was having trouble, and his doctor said, you better move on to the southwest where the air is better for your ailments. So he went out there. Mind you, it was his wife had died in 1908. So he left in 1916. Eventually went to California, where he died in 1946. The weather there in the Southwest must have been very good for him. And he's buried in the Southwest with his second wife. There's still lots of plots here in this that the family owns, but they still own them. The cemetery cannot sell them.
Is Gilbert named after the street named after Gilbert? There's a Gilbert Street by the railroad tracks that goes through town.
I do believe it is. Most of the streets in Evansville are named after prominent folks who lived here. Monuments in cemeteries from this time period with the log. Sometimes it's just a stump, symbolizing, of course, life cut short. Open Bible. Again, that's another piece of symbolism you'll find here. Sometimes, though, these are an indication that the people who erected them were members of the Modern Woodmen of the World, which is a fraternal, well, not exactly fraternal, but it's a burial association. There's another one right there for Moto.
If you go to the museum in French Lick, Indiana, they have a big exposition of this type of stonework, and a lot of that was made in that area in French Lick. What's that tree back there?
That is it's a burrow.
Burrow?
And I know because of the leaf shape, but it's also tagged.
How old is that thing?
That could be 100 years old.
That's fine.
Would it help to get rid of the vines on there?
Yeah. Although I don't think they're really hurting it that much. Well, it's not that particular one. Well, just the one vine we don't want around here is kudzu. That's a forest tree.
This portion is granite, and I think you can tell granite survives better than marble over here. Why the mixture of granite and marble, I don't know. Perhaps this is from an earlier monument. But if you're selecting a monument, if you want it to last, granite's it.
Do you think that's just sitting on top of that?
Yes.
Looks like
Well,
that.
there are probably some either iron or stainless steel rods that come up from this and go in it that are held in place by molten lead or lead that was molten and poured in. But marble is much more susceptible to breakage too and erosion. Occasionally people have put their photographs on their tombstones. The Romine monument there, that's their wedding photo. And you can see much newer, here's on the rose. The tradition continues. In fact, I think you see a few more of them. But they've been doing this in this cemetery from the 1860s. We have one in here that was put on in the 1860s. I think most of you will recognize this family name, Denton. The first member of the family who was of the town was George K. Denton. He got his law degree in 1893, and he was in Congress representing Evansville from 1917 to 1919. His son, Winfield S. Denton, also was a member of Congress. He's buried right here. He had an 8-year career in Congress from 1948 to 1966, except there was a brief interregnum in there from 1953 to 1954 when the Republicans won.
The federal building downtown next to your city county building is named Winfield Denton after that gentleman, and his house is by Baird Park, a large house there as well.
Right, very large house on the south side of the park. 1946, came to Evansville from Chicago, and he was in charge of the Evansville Veneer Company. And he transformed that into what was one time the biggest veneer company in the country.
Norman Harding.
Luring Ridgeway Monument, Mr. Luring owned a large lumber yard, the Luring Lumber Yard here in Evansville. And there were a lot of houses in there. Interested in history, especially the Civil War. General Robert Blythe is behind the family stone. He was in the Army Air Corps during World War II.
And like pharmacy still has a big building downtown. It was our biggest pharmacy industry in Evansville, and the building's still there. It's about 4 stories high, right across from Willard Library, across the highway from there.
And right by Zion Church downtown. He had a small bakery on Lincoln Avenue, and eventually that grew, and eventually his product sold under the Sunbeam name.
So the father of the Sunbeam Bakery, Mr. New.
Right. The Snooty, her cat and dog are memorialized there. Just like you remember your kitty, it looks like, with your head. You know, she wanted them to be remembered forever. No surprise, she was a volunteer at the Vanderbilt County Humane Society. There's a poodle right over here too. The whole family like their animals. And again, you can do this in a cemetery if you want, kind of personalize things. I know it brings a smile to my face to see them.
You can have your animals with you?
Well, just
No, you have them right on the stone.
On the stone, there's a dog right over there on that one, but
There's a poodle right here.
behind you. Yeah, behind you. Look at the one behind
So I'm sure you could have your animal with you if the animal is cremated.
Snooty's lived on Willow Road and Bellmead, and their one son just died. There's another one's a doctor in Indianapolis, an endocrinologist. But they lived on Willow Road and Bellmead, 2 doors off the corner. The biggest sugar maples in the county, and under it is a harp as a tombstone, unique aspect of tombstone.
The stone that's from the Edwin Heston plot. They had a summer cottage in Bayshore near Petoskey, Michigan, and that's a pudding stone from there. And they retrieved that stone and made sure that it was part of their monument. Again, there are ways to personalize things, and that certainly makes it more interesting for us. Mr. Heston had been president of the Evansville Park Board. Mr. Suffolk worked at don't know what he did for me. Mary M. Wood dates from the early 1940s. Mr. Wood was a master mechanic for the Chicago, Evansville, and Indianapolis Railroad. And it's a little bit unique for this cemetery. They have an inset of golden stone with the golden gates carved into it. It's a nice piece of sculpture. It's the only example of something like that in this cemetery, I think. Herman Patberg and Mary Patberg. Herman was president of the Standard Planing Mill. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, Evansville had 6 or 7 planing mills. These were mills that produced doors, woodwork, windows. You didn't buy some Anderson windows or Gelwin windows somewhere. They were made locally, and of course they were made out of wood. It was a big business. But there's the eternal flame once again. She came to Evansville in 1870 from the coal fields of Pennsylvania. He went into business for himself, had 2 coal mines and a fleet of barges on the river to haul the coal. This was a coal city. A good portion of Evansville has abandoned mines beneath it. The monuments here were made locally. This was made by the Schultz Company Monument Works. Mrs. Young and Mr. Young were taking a ride, a demonstration ride with a salesman in a car in 1914, and they were hit by a train. She died. Lots of stories in a cemetery. This is the gentleman who started, James Nugent started Nugent Sand and Gravel Company. They're still in town. Not under the name of Nugent anymore, of course. And still a prominent business in Evansville.
The grandson still lives up in Newburgh, but it was one of the big sand and gravel companies. Got everything out of the river, and very prominent. Sold out in the late 60s. My neighbor used to work for them, but they were very prominent. The Nugents are still living in Evansville, Newburgh area, but not part of the company, just part of spending the money.
Monument came to Evansville from Kentucky in 1861. Married Laura Castleberry and Robert Duncanson Robert Orr, familiar name, was their grandson. They had a very nice house on Southeast First near the Wrights' home.
What's their name?
Robert K. Dunkerson. Samuel May owned a construction company. Came to Evansville in 1902, and one of his biggest contracts was to build many of the first series of locks and dams on the Ohio River. These were constructed starting in about 1912. He died rather young in an automobile accident on the Dixie Bee Road. Anybody remember the Dixie Bee?
Highway 41.
It's Highway 41. That was the big road leading from Chicago to Miami. Cherry and Southeast First. I think that's a different family. This right here is the Cook Monument. And if you take a look over here, you can see several members of the family.
Is this the Cook Brewery or somebody else?
Yes, Henry Edward Cook, his wife Ada, and his sister Grace.
Dennis, do your notes say where Mrs. May is buried? Or...
No, I don't.
Oh,
It's her. Did you look on the other side of the window? Here, there were 3 mansions or large buildings on Fulton. Only one of them's left, Henry's house. It's being renovated right now, but Frederick, his father, had a large house on that block, and his brother also had a large house there. Every year they have left money in a perpetual remembrance fund, and every year flowers are planted here.
I don't smell that. It's one of the few Douglas firs in Evansville. There's another one over there. I think I saw one somewhere in Evansville a year or 2 ago, but I haven't really seen any anywhere else. There used to be one at Garvin and Washington, but the new owners cut it down.
Monument in the rear.
Hard cave ended.
The engineer is a refrigeration specialist. He has plans for an electrically operated compressor refrigerator system. He worked with Hercules Corporation. He was the first refrigerator for that type, and that's the type of refrigerator we still have. So he's a giant refrigerator. To the hilt, and this is one here, the Benson, with a couple of urns on the front corners, more urns on the stones, and then you have these large pieces of stones right over the graves with beautiful portraits on them. Lincoln, he played a role in the founding of Deaconess Hospital. Harold Fleger, in the beginning of the Bossy Furniture Empire, was prominent. Eventually, Bossy merged to form a company called Globe Bossy World, and it was one of the largest hardwood furniture companies in the country. You will not find Charlie Brown there. The Charles Schultz, unfortunately, Charles Schultz owned a large monument work here in Evansville, and of course, being in that business, he made sure that he did himself proud. They purchased it for. Called Johnson Island. It came to Evansville in 1905, and the temple right here went up in 1934, and it is called the Temple of Love. It's based on a classical Roman temple. It's made out of granite. It's a great piece of sculpture. E.B. Johnson is buried there, his wife over here, and other members of the family scattered about. Very pleasant place. And on the island, there's some marvelous cypress trees. And on the way out, when you go down the St. Albert, going back to the cypress here, you can see it over the lake.
We're letting them grow there. Having nice cypress growing along the edge of our pond. I'm from Illinois, not Illinois.
Cypress trees is what he's talking
Over there we
about.
have ponds rivers too, not lakes.
Beautiful cypress tree on
Red Lake,
Lee Johnson,
and Carlisle.
Johnson. Yeah.
The rest are all ponds.
Yep. So I think as we go on the bridge, you can see the cypress leaves that are here. It's just a gorgeous place. Wonderful place to sit over there. Coming up.
All on the edge there.
But those are actually a good thing. They help discourage erosion.
See, most people think that trees get most of the air from the leaves, and they don't. There's some exchange that happens up there, but most of the air that the trees need are from the roots. And so when cypress trees are inundated like this here, that's how they breathe, is they grow these roots up and develop these leaves, and literally the trees are breathing through the leaves.
So there's no more fish in here at all.
Well, I'm sure that there are some small.
They were responsible for that.
Faultless Castor.
Faultless Castor.
Over on, right next to Chrysler. The building's still there.
Garvin.
On Garvin, near the Mel K Electric now. Railroad track near North High School.
Another furniture related family, the Alfred E. Small family.
Mockernut hickory tree.
What kind of hickory?
Mockernut?
Is it edible?
Oh yeah. I think all hickory nuts are edible. Some are tastier than others, but they're hard to get over. See, pecan technically is a hickory. Yeah. But
It's a hickory, champion of Anglican.
A.C. Grimm, 1923. He owned a large lumber company and planing mill, and was in partnership with William Johann. The Johanns had a mortuary business, and in the 19th century, one of the most important qualifications to have mortuary was to be a good woodworker, good enough to make a casket.
And the Grimm Lumber Company was on Weinbach. I think Tess Grimm was married into the family, and she was in charge of the Wrights home. And Johann Funeral Home had about 400 funerals a year. They went defunct in 1965. Their building was very large. They made monuments and other things as well. It's right behind McDonald's on North Main, about 2 blocks back. It's on Illinois, but it was a very large funeral home in town, I guess partly owned by the Grimms.
Are you talking about
Johann Funeral Home.
Ronnie and Tessie Graham?
Ronnie and Tess Grimm. That Grimm, they were part of the Grimm Lumber Company, yes. And she was part of the Wrights home for years.
Homeopathic physician. Homeopathy believed that disease could be treated with distilled oils from natural occurring things. Skin or something. He was one of several early horseless buggy dealers here in Evansville. There's a cluster of people who owned and worked in taverns over there, and still to this day there are employments there for people who have worked in some of the taverns for a long time. Yeah?
And this,
I don't know. Just, yeah, I don't know. Chris Cook just started noticing that. Chris.
this tombstone, it says Shears here. Downtown is a very pretty building. It's a yellow building about 2nd and Walnut, and it's a yellow building, yellow brick, 2 stories high, and that was Greek Shears Mortuary. Greek, and the Shears joined them, and they had it and sold it in the 90s, and then it was called Zemer Shears Mortuary for about a decade. Then the Shears family left the funeral business, and Zemer continued it. But if you remember, when the highway went through about 1980, it was Zemer and Shears 80 to 90, and then Zemer left, or Shears left. But that's Robert Shears, and he joined the Greek funeral home. Greek Shears for lots of has an indoor parking. It's now apartments, about 9 parking places down below. But it was a mortuary for many years for the Jewish descent.
It's a beautiful building. James F. Denton. He owned a monument works. In other words, he built, made and carved monuments for cemeteries. And he retired from that business in 1937. And that business went out of business in 1980. They own the hardware wholesale business in Evansville at the base of Fulton Avenue. And there's another Bedecker plot here in the cemetery. Children love it because it has a huge bronze dog there.
And it's called Bedecker Kellogg, and there's one descendant still living. Her name is Mrs. Fidler. She's about 95, but her maiden name was Bedecker, and she inherited a lot of the Bedecker money. That's her mother, yes. If you look, the death date, she died the dad died before the mother, for about 11 years earlier, so she didn't have a father, part of her life.
This is E. Meade Johnson Jr. There was no longer any room in the inn over there, and well, the family didn't always approve of E. Meade Johnson Jr. and so he's off the island. I think it reminds me of a reality TV show.
Poor guy.
But
wonder what he did wrong. Do you know the scoop, honey?
His house was in on College Street in Evansville, or on College Highway. But E. Meade Johnson Jr. kind of carved into the doorway, and E. Meade Johnson died in 1993 in Palm Beach, Florida at the age of 78. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your patience with me. And again, we're going to have another tour, something different in the fall. We'll have presentations, people dressed as personalities who are buried here. This will not be a ghost tour. It's something that's very respectful, but it's interesting to do this in the evening or when it's nearly dark. It's a different feel out here. But again, we're charging for that. We're trying to raise money to preserve the trees and maintain the trees here in the cemetery. It's a very expensive proposition to keep this up. So.